Hello! This is my beginner's guide on how to set up your Ricoh GR3 and GR3X for daytime and nighttime. First of all, I do not use program mode. I shoot much more at night than I do in daytime, so it made more sense that I have two separate settings saved for this camera, one for daytime and one for nighttime. And one advantage of doing this is that I can save the settings and quickly bring it back whenever I need it. Whereas with program mode, it will just save the settings that you were using last time. First, let's get into how I set my user settings 1, which is my daytime setting. For my focus, I have it set at auto area center. And if you go down to custom and touch AF, I have it set as point, focus and shoot. Now I can use my finger to touch on where I want to focus and shoot. I don't like focusing and recomposing, so I do not use pinpoint autofocus, but this will vary from person to person. Autofocus assist light off to be discreet, and snap focus distance at 2.5 meters. This depends on how close you like to get to your subjects when you shoot. I found that 2.5 meters is the closest I get to my subjects, so that's how I have it set up. And I have full press snap on, so I can press the shutter all the way without half pressing it to trigger a snap distance shot. You can easily change the snap distance without going to the menu. Just use the front wheel while pressing the micro button to adjust your snap distance. Exposure mode manual. It is very easy to use the wheel on the back to adjust the exposure. I like to underexpose a little bit for my daytime photos, so I have it set anywhere between -1 to 0. AE metering, I have it set to multi-segment. And I have the max ISO set at 6400. My initial thought was to set this at 800, but this camera has a built-in ND filter. And I use this camera indoors too. So sometimes you will go over 800 ISO. Either way, it usually won't even get close to 6400, so you don't need to worry about it. And from using this camera for over a year now, I found that it is really good at keeping the ISO low. My shutter speed is set at 250th of a second, and I can use the adjust dial for adjusting shutter speed. But I don't need to fuss with this too much for daytime use. I can use the control wheel on the front to control my aperture. I have it closed down to f11 to maximize my in-focus area for snap focus. Now go down to C, FN button settings, and have the ISO button set as snap focus distance. And have the drive mode button set as snap priority mode. Now you can press the ISO button to get into snap distance mode, and press drive button to get into snap priority mode. You can experiment with these two modes and see what you like more. Now go down to C and save settings at user 1. Now let's get into how I set my user settings 2, which is my nighttime settings. Focus is auto area center. Go down to custom to enable touch focus and shoot. But you will find that Ricoh will struggle a lot even with touch focus. So you have to get familiar with snap focus because you will need it at nighttime. Maybe more than you do at daytime. I have the snap distance set to infinite. I usually have the background in focus and have the subjects as my foreground at nighttime because I like this look. Exposure mode manual, AE metering multi-segment. I advise against having this as highlight weighted because that will make your highlights middle gray and your shadows will be way too dark. But if you're really worried about blowing out those highlights, then you can have it set as highlight weighted and have the exposure to +1 to +2. Max ISO at 6400. I have found that this is the limit for GR3X for usable photos. I set my shutter speed at 100. I think this shutter speed is the slowest shutter speed to freeze motion. If you go down to 1/60th of a second, then you will start seeing some motion blur. And usually I don't really like that in my daytime or nighttime photos. f4 is my set aperture. I found that you don't always have to shoot wide open even for night photography, because we are shooting at a subject that is lit up or pointing at a light source. I change my shutter speed quite often depending on the situation to bring down the ISO. If there are no moving subjects, I know I can go down to 1/4 of a second for a sharp image thanks to the image stabilization. And if I'm in a very slow shutter speed and need to return to the faster shutter speed, then I know I can just switch the dial to user 1, then switch back to user 2 to come back to it. Now go down to C and save the settings at user 2 for nighttime. So this is all I have for today. Hope this helped you set up your Ricoh. Happy shooting, and I'll see you in the next one.